Hey guys, Swim here, and welcome to my deck guide for my Wounding Spellige list. This is a list I made today on stream. At the time of recording, it was earlier today, although it'll be, yesterday for a lot of you guys. And it's very, very good. What you're looking at is my slightly preliminary version. By the time that this is posted, the Gwent DB version, which you can find in the comments section of this video, might be updated one or two cards, but ultimately I think this version is very, very solid. Basically, the principle of this deck is that not a lot of people are running counters to Axemen. Like Marjo is a pretty good counter. And Stammelford's Tremors and Biting Frost are both incredibly good cards right now. Stammelford's Tremors, this card is so insanely underrated, it's ridiculous. It has such an easy time dealing 16 damage even without Axemen, and even with Axemen it just starts snowballing like crazy. But anyway, this list uses X-Men, as always. It's got one Hunter just as a last bronze filler. I didn't really want three Freyas in this list. I didn't feel like I ended up needing that many. Shield Maidens, this card is incredibly difficult to cut. This card is very, very, very strong. I basically always use this card as a round 3 finisher. Mulligan away all copies in round 1. Sometimes I'm using it round 2 if I'm forced into it, but this is a round 3 card. Roach. Roach might seem like an odd choice here considering like how valuable my silver slots are. Like I could run Skellige Storm or Aeromancy, and I was at an earlier point. I could run something like Sigdrifa, could even run something like Okfist, or Udalric, or Olgierd. There's a lot of silver slots, so Roach might seem like a strange inclusion, but the tempo that Roach provides is very important with how slowly this list generally takes to set itself up in the way that it wants to set up. And you can find that you're setting up so slow that the opponent out-tempos you and passes. That's a problem. That's kind of always a problem with snowball lists. You need early tempo options, and that is actually part of the reason why Yennefer Conjurer is not here, which is something that you guys might have noticed as well. I really, really need those early tempo options, and I need to get away from cards like Yennefer Conjurer that are just additional setup cards. Part of the reason why this Brock for Hunter isn't a one of Savage Bear at the same time. Because if, like, I already have Axemen, I already have stuff like Frost and Wild Boar of the Sea. If I have so many cards, if my entire deck is just slow cards that take like 4 turns to actually start generating me great value, then I'm incredibly vulnerable to a pass, and Roach really helps with that. Obviously, the Morkvarg, as you can see, this is a crash list. Many people try to run this with Heralds. This list has pretty notable anti-synergy with Heralds. Heralds is a bad card, and honestly, part of the reason that most people playing Axemen end up failing is because they're running Herald. Cratch is fine. Herald is too situational. It's impossible to actually get real value out of him except in the most niche of circumstances. You can hit a lot of stuff, but you're better off using stuff like Tremors and Frost to deal your damage and buff your Axemen. Crash is very important. So the Morkvarg gets pulled by the Crash. You'll notice that the Operator comes out at higher, so unless you end up drawing the Operator, you will actually be pulling Operator with Crash. I'm not 100% sure how I feel about that interaction moving forward in this deck. It's possible I'll include an Alzur's Double Cross or something to have an easier time of pulling out Morkvarg with Crash, but at the very least it's not bad. It increases my reliability Operator. The only thing that it might imply is that if you don't end up drawing the Operator, you might be inclined to keep a Morkvarg in hand. We'll see about that. Wild Boar of the Sea, pretty reliable card. Buff up your Morkvarg, same as you do in Crash. Like the Wild Boar Morkvarg Crash combo is basically a staple, but you use a different bronze package for everything else. Operator, clone your Axemen. In some niche situations, you can do something cute like clone a Shield Maiden and then mulligan it away, but for the most part, it's an Axemen clone. Avalak. Card might look a little weird. The gold options for Skellige were really, really underwhelming for this list. Basically, like there is removal options, those being Lugos, Coral, and Igni, but this deck doesn't need more removal. It has kind of a lot of removal, and it needs to get away from those. And in addition, you'll note that Coral and Igni specifically are cards that they're kind of cards that work better in later rounds. And as I was just explaining, you want like higher tempo plays. Avalak is pretty great for this list. He's solid. he draws you 2 cards, which can enable you to find your combo better, which is obviously anyone who's played Axemen in previous patches will tell you the biggest downside of Axemen is that they can be a little unreliable to draw. And if you end up renewing the Avalak, you can actually end up milling Nilfgaard and other factions sometimes, which is pretty powerful. Hjalmar, Skellige auto-include cards, incredible. Yeah, this card's actually incredible. Obviously, synergies with the Axemen because it provides an additional target for stuff like Tremors and Frost to hit. One point with Hjalmar is you can actually choose where the Lord of Unvik spawns. Now, I will be going into this with distinct examples in the gameplay section of this video, but choosing where the Lord of Unvik spawns on the row, like which lateral position on the row it spawns on, is actually quite important, and you can do some cool stuff with that. Donar is your basic lock or unlock. Not 100% sure how I feel about this card in this deck. It's basically here to unlock Axemen and Morkvarg, but I've also got Decoy for that. This card seems kind of kickable. Gramist is Gramist. It's always Gramist. Card's very, very solid. Decoy is Decoy. In this list, it's basically an unlocking tool. You unlock Morkvarg or unlock Axemen and end up boosting their base strength by 3 in doing so. So the Morkvarg comes back at higher strength, and you might be able to res the Axemen at higher strength as well. Renew. Again, Renew might seem like a bit of a weird choice, but in the same situation as Avalak, there is honestly not that much gold competition here. Like Ciri is actually something I might want in this list, but again, I don't know if I have enough tempo to properly use her. She's kind of a tempo-driven card, and so many options are just kind of win more. Like, I don't want more control cards like Arge, because they're only good when I'm already ahead. Yennefer is something that a lot of people have considered, and Chironex is kind of nice, but I don't necessarily know if I want a gold to do that. She's definitely a good budget option. Regis Higher Vampire is okay. Yennefer Conjurer is okay, but a little anti-synergistic, despite what she may look like. Gold Weathers are decent, but anti-synergistic. Since I'm already using other elements to control them. So you end up with pretty few gold options. So you end up with something like Renew. That being said, Renew is not a bad card. This card's very underrated. Some people often pass to the Wild Boar. You can renew it back. Again, renewing Avalak and renewing Hjalmar is always good. And renewing stuff from the opponent's graveyard is great. There's a chance I end up swapping this card out, but I'm not terribly displeased with it, ultimately. Anyway, again, you can find this entire list on GwentDB. There will be a full written guide available in the comment section. But until then... Well, okay, I should also mention that there's gonna... If you're looking for crafting orders for this deck, or, like, gold and silver replacements, in-depth ones... I've listed some here, but in-depth ones, go to the guide. That'll cover that. Anyway, we will be jumping into some games now, and I'll see you guys how it functions at the top 50 ladder. Okay, so we get into our first game here against Rita. Let's see what we've got here. So, top 50, 40. Using a monsters list, this deck has, so far, a pretty decent time against the monsters matchup. They put a lot of bodies on the board. Ultimately, this deck so far has achieved a noticeably positive win rate. Here it's neutral after just 2 games, but for the most part, it's a positive win rate against everything except for spell decks. And that's kind of the biggest problem with this deck at like a top level stance, is that when you encounter the Skoya spell or the Nilfgaard spell, you might just be in a bad position anyway. We're going to go ahead and blacklist the Shield Maiden here, of course. We're going to want to kick the Roach, and then we kick the Morkvarg to be pulled with our Cratch, since we have got the Operator. We actually would have kicked this other Shield Maiden if we didn't have to use all of our kicks. We used the first one for the Blacklist, second one for Roach, and the third one to get the Morkvarg out of here. If we had an additional kick, we actually would have kicked this Shield Maiden too, because like I said, you want to be able to use these in round 3, maybe round 2, but these are not really round 1 cards, and there's very few matchups or situations where you even benefit from the ability to play them in round 1 given the choice to. So, we'll open with Crouch here. Play it on the right side, pulling the Morkvarg to the left side. Typical 14-point play. It's a little unfortunate that we lost the coin flip. This deck, it doesn't like losing the coin flip. Now, that might sound funny, because obviously no deck likes losing the coin flip, but even relatively, it's something that I don't really have a good solution for. I kind of wish I had Ciri. Something to slow the game down, or force some pressure on the opponent, but I don't really have a way to do it without giving the opponent a decent luxury pass. Whoa. Huh. That's pretty interesting. And his Dagon is what, 13 points immediately? So he always can beat me with that. Very slow play coming up by him. Could just end up operating here. Operate one of our Axemen. Pretty typical play. He knows what kind of list we're running now. With any list where you've got like a normal leader but a kind of strange list, such as my Nilfgaard spell list, it's, you know, it's always a bit of a shame when you have to show your hand, but ultimately it doesn't really matter in this case. So the consideration is basically, the question is, do you frost or Axemen first? And the answer is, if you expect them to clear it, you Axemen first, because you'd like to have an Axemen on the board when you're fighting to keep the frost to stick, because it'll at least be ticking every turn that you replay it. But otherwise, you might want to have the frost first. We're gonna go ahead and put the Axemen down first here, though. Should be able to force them out of round one pretty easily here. This is kind of a two-rounding list. Go ahead and put Frost down once here. We don't want to put another Axeman down because we don't want to have them at the same points for Igni range. So, otherwise, we probably would just keep developing Axemen. If he clears this, then we're gonna keep developing Maxen because they're not an Igni range anymore. So, let's say he Arch Griffins this to clear it. I put another Axeman down, staying ahead of his score by 2 points. Okay. And we're just gonna start snowballing out of control here. He's getting a small amount of key value out of his Axemen, but not like any real amount of value, and we're gonna start getting a lot of points. In these games, hopefully, well, I say hopefully, you'll see how crazy Stamelford's Tremors can be here. It can be absolutely nutty. Like, this card can very easily achieve like 40 points in really common scenarios. Very, very ridiculous. He should have to get out of this round pretty soon. He can't really fight us here. I mean, he obviously has the line to Igni this turn if he wants. It's a decent Igni, but it's not incredible, and I expect he already would have done it if he could. Lacerate. Clear skies. So he's seeing how much of a threat that Frost actually is. We're just gonna refrost. Huge value, of course. We basically just got 12 value off of that. Just that one tick of frost gave us 12 value. We're putting a really crazy amount of pressure on him. He might have to get out of the round now. We'll see. I mean, if he doesn't have a way to clear it, he has no choice. He obviously doesn't have Igni. He would have used it already. Excuse me. But yeah, the list has kind of a hard time to really do that much in this sort of situation. Yep, there he is. He's out of the round. So, unfortunately, we had to go one card down for this. If we had won the coin flip, we wouldn't have had to go that one card down. I don't know. Hopefully, they'll add a compensating feature to the coin flip in the very near future, because it's really hard to ignore the advantage of it. Anyway, as I mentioned, this is kind of a list that wants to two-round much of the time. And of course, we do have the Wild Boar for the Morkvarg. Could go deep for this. So it's going to take me to mulligan here. It's kind of slow for some reason. Interesting consideration. Not sure what to do. Decoy is important if he's running Fiend, and people decently often run Fiend. Two Stamelfords is important if I want to push for the round. I could kick this Shield Maiden, draw round 3, but I'm not sure about that. Ooh, that's a good draw. It's an interesting consideration here, because I do need to go kind of deep for this round, but at the same time, I am 100% locked out of using Renew, and that can be awkward. Obviously, Roach went on the bad row, so Roach is literally just going to die to R1 Wild Boar now, which is really, really bad, but kind of funny. God damn it, Roach. So the question is, do we push in this scenario? We've got high tempo, despite Roach dying. We do want to be able to decoy the Morkvarg to heal it. as well, which we can do when it's down to 3 points. So I think we do push here. I don't have a way to kill the Hjalmar, which is super unfortunate. Shield Maiden or Frost would be good, or you know, the Lord of Unvik, because I have 2 hits of the Stamford's Tremors, but it's not necessarily enough here. Might actually have to pass here. A very awkward scenario. Could also Hjalmar. I'll just pass here. We enabled our renew even if we didn't do it in a super amazing way. And we forced an extra card out of him. Just looking to take this to our round 3 scenario where we can get more value. So we're losing 2 to the Fog, and then the Wild Boar is going even because Roach won on the wrong row. Very, very unfortunate. If Roach hadn't ruled that 1 and 3, we would be in definitely a more dominant position. We would have at least forced something better than this Blood-Curdling Roar. Might have forced, you know, an additional card, possibly. So, not great. I'm not 100% sure about Wild Boar the Sea. I find it personally impossible that Roach might not be correct in the list, and I will have to get out of this mulligan now. I don't think I have a choice. I mean, Decoy loses a lot of its value. Basically all of its value. I'd really love to draw a Freya, a Frost, or another Stammelford's, but I would really hate to draw another Shield Maiden. This is a bit of a risky play. We got the Avalak, which is good, but we're going to have to use the Shield Maiden first, and we kind of want to use the Shield Maiden a little later. So we will be renewing our Wild Boar right off the bat. Yeah, it is a little awkward how Roach goes to the right side of Wild Boar sometimes. That being said, I can't see an argument for getting rid of Roach. Roach is really, really good with what this list needs, very specifically. Just Axemen here. I mean, it looks kind of bad to play it in the same row, but ultimately don't really have a choice. Because, I mean, he's just going to fog any other row I played it anyway. Doesn't really matter. But I'm obviously on the right side here. These eggs just give us targets to eat. So the boar is going to buff this, and then it's going to get by the fog. Withers trigger at the end of all the turn start effects, so the wild boar does end up triggering first there. Could play the other Axemen here, but they do line up to the Igni in a very unfortunate way. So the only other consideration is Hjalmar. Play Hjalmar first, and then Stammelford's, and then play the other Axemen. We lose a lot of value out of doing that. This is where we kind of regret not having Frost. And one of the awkward things is we might end up drawing Frost off the Avalak, but we really can't afford to Avalak until we Shield Maiden, and we need to Shield Maiden after something takes damage. So we're kind of in an awkward trap here. Not great. So, as I mentioned before, you can choose where to put the Lord of Unvik on their side with the Hjalmar. There's no place that it's actually great for in this specific case, but we're going to put it right here. So basically, the idea with the Lord of Unvik, the trick to knowing where this card gets placed, is basically Hjalmar tries to summon it to the right of him, but on the opponent's side. So if you mark the positions of the cards, like Hjalmar is my #1 card. This is 1, this is 2, 3, 4. So he has 1, 2, 3, 4 before the Unvik comes down. So Hjalmar puts it to the right of the position that he's in. So for example, if I'd put the Hjalmar in the middle of the range draw on my empty range draw, the Lord of Unvik would have spawned between these two eggs, because the position of the Hjalmar is the first one from the left. So it spawns it to the right of the first one from the left on the opponent's side, which is this egg. So between these. It's actually a very important trick to learn, because you can disrupt like wild boar combos, you can disrupt a lot of stuff. And I've even had right before I started this, I actually had some guy in the Spellige mirror. he was playing light longships, and he actually he his light longship was literally giving me points because I had 4 Axemen at the time. His light longship was giving me points any turn. He literally decoyed the light longship onto the right side of a row where so it wouldn't hit anything anymore, and I just put a Lord of Unvik on the right side of that row. You can do a lot of cheeky stuff. Being able to choose exactly where you want to place this card is actually pretty nice. That's unfortunate for me. So what I was trying to do there was something kind of cheeky. I was putting the Axemen at the same strength. The Frog would have hit them both, fixing my Igni problem because it hits this one, taking off the armor, and it hits this one to 2 strength. The problem is now that that's not the case. Like when I Stammelford's Tremors here, he could actually just Igni them because the Frog wouldn't have ticked yet, and that's a super big problem. That loses me the game. I mean, I win this game if he can't Igni me both. I'm considering doing something kind of strange, like hitting one of them with Shield Maiden. Yeah, this is really quite weird. So we're actually going to Shield Maiden this Frightener. We're going to Shield Maiden the Frightener again, and then we're going to hit the Lord of Unvik. So basically the logic behind this is now the Fog is going to tick these down. Still Igni them now. But the Lord of Unvik is at 3 strength, so he dies to both of the Tremors, and we have the line to Avalak. Avalacking early is probably the better option. It allows us to draw into Freya's for my 3rd and 4th Axemen, and possibly something like Biting Frost as well. So no Igni. He's gonna lose a absolutely absurd amount of value to these Tremors, though. As I was mentioning, Tremors is, I mean, if you look at this board state and you start doing the math, Tremors is literally ridiculous. There's no other word for it. It's just ridiculous. So we'll have luck here, stop the Wild Boar from damaging this. Makes it last longer against the Fog, I guess. So we've got a Freya now. It instantly dies, but it brings back the Axemen, which is powerful. Into the double Tremors, which is of course just ludicrous. And we can of course clear skies with Gremists. We're kind of looking like we want to. He's just gonna spawn more weather. Like, I can't really escape the weather. He's got Dagon for more. If I can't escape it, there's kind of no point in clearing it. At the same time, fogging his board doesn't end up doing much. Right play seems to be Freya into another Axemen. I will just be putting this Axemen on the on this row. I don't want to enable. I mean, there's kind of nothing scary here. Like, it's not like he's gonna Ragnarok us or anything, but I'd still like to stick to my rows if possible. And the fact that he's tanking the Fog is obviously meaningless because he's the only unit. The Fog is always hitting this row anyway. I can blood curdling row this for points. Okay. So now you're going to see what I was talking about with the Stammelford's Tremor. So you're going to see about the most absurd amount of value from a bronze you've ever seen. So I lose the points from this. Let's see what we end up here. So we end up 14 points down. So 14 points down off the Tremors. And we get to see a fun little animation here. So, and then off of, what is that, 49 to 75, so that's an extra 26 points. So 14 down to 26 up, it's a 40-point Tremors. And unfortunately we whiffed the Lord of Unvik, which is super awkward because that means it never dies, but it won't matter here. He can't really win. The way I played around the Lord of Unvik was a little awkward. I definitely could have sequenced a couple things better into this last round, for sure. This Harpy being 3 strength and protecting his entire row from Fog is kind of awkward. I'm kind of inclined to Stammelford's Tremors There's obviously, it's only going to hit a maximum of 8 targets. I want my Grimace to be able to fog him, I think. There is kind of a consideration at this point to clear the weathers. He'll probably resummon the foglets. They'll all die. He'll resummon them into presumably Viscera, and then his bear will tank. Yeah, okay. Fog is really the most value I'm gonna get here. But he's never gonna fog me. I'll just Drummers here. And again, basically the same kind of value swing. Really, really hard for him to beat that. Kind of insanely hard. He could... It is still winnable on his end. He'd have to have a very Hail Mary hand. Rally's not going to do very much here. Might see a concede come out at this point.
Have you nothing better to do?
So, we would have there just blood curdling roared at the Markvarg. The Markvarg was at 4 strength, and his base strength was something like 18 at that point. So he would have come back as a 15, and we get our bear for free. It's kind of the last power play. If the Tremors had hit differently, we might have considered Fog and the Ranger to clear it. But anyway, good example of how this deck fares at a top rank right now. Let's go to game 2. Okay, here we are seeing a hard porn star playing the Hansel list. Usually you see most top players playing the full test variant these days. Hansel, huh? Not 100% sure what to expect from it. Obviously, Reaver Hunters. Reaver Hunters constitute a pretty ridiculous amount of strength, but so of course does my deck. Here we blacklist for efficiency, and we kind of want both Frost and Stamelfords. We're going to go ahead and kick a Freya right off. We don't want these so early. They're kind of for later. We have to kick Frost or Stamelfords now. Kick 1 Stamelfords. I like the option to have 1 Frost. Pretty potent hand. We don't actually want to draw either a Shield Maiden or a Morkvarg or a Roach. There's 5 cards that we don't want to draw right now. We'll get out of this hand early. And of course, none of the 5 have been blacklisted, so we have the possibility of drawing all of them. So getting out early. Lose the coin flip again. It's kind of shitty. But yeah, again, you don't actually want Shield Maidens in round 1 with this deck. And now that you can mulligan in round 2 and round 3, you're basically guaranteed to get them. So you shouldn't have any qualms about like, oh, I might not draw them by round 3. You'll always draw them by round 3, even without Avlak, but especially with him. Might as well just open in the same way, I guess.
You've got the heart.
And of course, be very sure to remember that Operator is actually the highest strength unit in this particular list. Might end up changing that. It can be kind of uncomfortable sometimes, but it's also very potent. Operator is the highest strength unit, so when you don't draw the Operator, be wary that the Cratch will pull it out. Don't forget about that. Kind of interesting. So obviously one trick you can do in many situations in any Spellige deck that runs this combo is once the Markvarg gets low, in this case basically 2 strength, you decoy it, healing it, and increasing its base strength. It's a decent play. I'm looking for a way to Axemen. I don't want to Biting Frost until I Axemen. The consideration is Axemen or Operator, and the follow-up consideration is which row do I put Axemen in. I'm inclined to put it in the melee row. The question is, does he have an easy way to deal 2 damage? I feel like that deck has basically no capacity to deal that amount of damage. Like, you can use Philippa. You can use Vernon Roche. Vernon Roche would suck. I don't know if he'd be inclined to use Vernon Roche on a single target to kill, but I don't want to give him the opportunity. He could always Philippa here. If I were him, I would Philippa here. Hit the Markvarg for 5, down to 3, bounce to the Axemen, killing it on 4, back to the Markvarg, hitting it for 3, killing that, resummoning it. It doesn't bounce the 2 on the resummoned Morkvarg, does it? There's actually a chance it interacts that way, because it could treat the new Morkvarg as a new target to bounce to. I don't think it works like that, but he could get an extra 2 value out of it if it does. I would Philippa this personally if I was him.
I told you
Like,
so, you
it's
idiot.
kind of greedy to wait for a better Philippa. So, I kind of assume this means he doesn't have Philippa. Now, I'm in theory slightly scared of my Axemen, but I've got the Frost here. Frost really shuts him out of his possibility there. And like I said, we're scared of the Vernon Roche, but we're out of Vernon Roche range now. Could actually end up being a slightly awkward matchup. The combination of Philippa and Vernon Roche might end up being awkward for us. This rain's super awkward. I could Grimace it. I don't expect him to play too much more weather. The only consideration not to Grimace it is basically if I want to play a third one and see if he covers my entire board. I don't expect him to. He could easily be running Ragnar or Joe in that list, in which case Grimace gets killed immediately and don't have an opportunity to decoy him. No Sigdrift on the list. And then I'm forced out of the round regardless. I think it's still the proper play though. Rain is kind of too annoying to not deal
Not a
with.
moment's peace.
So I expect either a third Arethusa Adept or possibly a Ragnar Gudrout here. The Northern Realms faction does kind of like running one of those weathers more so than the others, I would say. So getting 12 value out of Blood Curdling Roar. Pretty potent play. Could commit a second Axemen here. Obviously it's a mistake because we have Operator in hand and we want to clone it. But even beyond that, the problem with this Axemen is it's kind of committal. We have no Freyas in this hand. We assume we draw more out of Avalek, but not having a Freyas in the hand is a bit awkward. We're just going to stay in this with the Operator on his Axemen, or give him an Axemen. Just staying ahead of him at every opportunity. Looks like he's pushing us far here. Our Donar has the capacity to unlock our Morkvarg, or possibly lock one of his Reaver Hunters that he plays. Wow. Whoa, I don't know about that. So now I've got the decoy on the Morkvarg that I mentioned before. Pretty powerful play. You'll note the Donar, something really, really funny that could happen is I could discard his Hunter to my graveyard, which kind of screws up his entire game plan. He loses a ridiculous amount of value off of that, since of course Hunters boost each other exponentially. Literally exponentially when you play them. So taking one Hunter off of him like that is pretty super valuable. I will just be doing this. It's a very high value decoy. It's basically, I mean, it's the same thing as a Marjo in this specific case, but this is a specific case where Marjo is incredible. It heals it for 12 points and boosts its base strength by 3. What's not to like?
This is no time to whimper.
Okay. So there is a consideration to lock that with Donar. He loses a bit of value in terms of being able to push this round out, because of course when it's locked it doesn't, the bond effect doesn't work properly. And again, I would commit with more Axemen here, but honestly Axemen are possibly more valuable than this Donar. I will just be Donaring this. Super funny if we steal his Reaver Hunter. We didn't, we stole a Reaver Scout, which is also kind of cute. Reaver Scout could actually be a Freya target here. I think it really might be. Like basically if we draw Freya instead of a last Axeman, we Freya the Scout, pull out a last Axeman. Other than that, you know, it's a potential res target. That's kind of why Donar is nice sometimes. He's a kind of cute card. So here's the Bork. Bork is definitely an awkward scenario for this deck, for sure. It's one of the things that this deck simply doesn't have that much of an answer for. It's pretty interesting that he would Bork here, though. I feel like I can still beat that. I really don't see how he beats this. I mean, his bear is dying. It's basically his bear and my Axemen, which I'm pretty okay with. I still stay in the round. I'm kind of incentivized to play Hjalmar. The problem is if I Hjalmar now with a Bork, he could D-Shackles it. If he's running Bork, there's a good chance he's running D-Shackles. I'd much rather Avalak, which has basically less of a chance of actually being hit by that Bork. Let's Avalak here. Doesn't really matter which way I put it in.
It's time.
It could actually draw Roach, because Roach... Oh, it didn't draw Roach. Good. It might have... The animation looked too fast, but it could actually have drawn Roach. That would have been incredibly awkward, because, of course, then he doesn't pull Roach. But it's fine. And, again, you'll note that we're actually in a position where milling him is a viable recourse in this situation. We have the Renew on the Avalak in a later round. He's siling, rallying. He's thinning himself a lot, and we've got the Renew on the Avalak. It looks like he very, very possibly might just be getting milled here. So, it looks like this Bork really isn't netting him that many points, honestly. Rain is definitely netting him more points than Bork ever was. And if we hadn't blown the decoy on the Morkvarg, we could use it here on the Grimmest. I'm not necessarily regretting blowing it on the Morkvarg, but it's just an observation. Stay in the round. Yeah. I'll play my Reaver Hunters here. It'll kind of keep my Morkvarg alive from the rain, I guess. I'm still not terribly sure what his idea is here. Is he gonna protect that bear somehow? Is he gonna play Thaler? And then the Thaler dies along with the bear? That's a decent plan, I guess. I mean, if he's running Bork, he kind of has to be running Thaler. He's hovering over the Axemen I gave him, so I guess he's playing that. Yeah, he's really getting pretty low value out of this Bork, all things considered, I would say. Okay. So, I actually have a pretty cute, unique opportunity here. The Bork will be going off for literally just like 2 points in this case. Don't care about that. We're always going to push this round out with more Axemen. And we're going to take it to a round 3 scenario. But I have a cute opportunity to actually use Axemen here without them getting hit by the rain next turn, since I've got these ones. So, Bork goes off here, squishing my Axemen, squishing his bear. Lost a lot of value off of that. And I'm ready to just push this round out. Like, I've got the Renew on the Avalak, which is actually giving me a lot of value. He's committed the Siri at this point. So, I'm ready to Stamelford's Tremors. I'm looking to stay ahead of him at this point, and that's the easiest way of doing that. He is putting a good amount of pressure on me. And due to his Siri and the fact that I lost the coin flip, if he passes now, we're 2 cards down, but that's okay. This rain is very awkward. The rain... I could have developed another Axemen. I mean, I've got the other Avalak off of Renew, so I'm basically guaranteed to find Freya's. We need to win this round. It's very awkward for us if he can force us out of this round. Great, perfect. Amazing. So, pass here, take it. And we're 2 cards down, but that's okay. So, obviously, I found too many Shield Maidens. Kick a Shield Maiden. Shield Maidens kind of suck. Just a little bit of lag. They don't suck. they're a really ridiculous card, but they suck to draw like that. So, obviously, there's an option to renew his Bork. We would much rather renew Avalak here. The only problem is there's a good chance he has the Neneki, and the Neneki will prevent him from overdrawing at least. I mean, it'll neutralize the Hensalt, which is good for him because the Hensalt is one of his biggest problems right now in terms of my renew onto the Avalak. This could be my pass already. I'm kind of liking the idea of this instant pass. There's kind of no reason to play out this round. We'd like to get more value out of Shield Maiden, Axemen, etc. on a long round, so let's take it to a long round. I mean, depending on our draws, we can actually beat his Hunter combo on a long round, which seems kind of absurd, because Hunter combo is kind of absurd, but like, if we end up drawing, I mean, obviously we'll have the Shield Maiden combo, we end up drawing into, like, Freya's for our Axemen, our last Axemen, or rather even Freya's for the Reaver Scout for the Axemen, correction. Our last Stamelford's Tremors here is going to be a huge boon for us. We'd love to see that last Stamelford's Tremors. He has to commit 2 cards here to beat me. This is a very slow deck. It's not at all a surprise that, I mean, it would be a surprise if he could even do 12 in a single card with a deck like that. So he commits that to beat me, and obviously the Reaver Hunter is a huge tell that he has Naneki, but if you're running Reaver Hunters in a Hensel deck, you're always going to have Naneki anyway, so we already knew that. Morkvarg comes back as an 8, pretty powerful. If we kick... Do we kick a Shield Maiden here? It's kind of weird. We want a Shield Maiden late. This is a bit of a risky play. We're going to kick this Shield Maiden. We want the Shield Maiden after the Avalak, which is a little awkward. So by kicking the Shield Maiden, we can renew it. That being said, this is banking on us drawing basically 1 Shield Maiden, which is very likely. And it's not an entire disaster if we don't or anything like that. So we'll go ahead and play a wild boar to see here. It's obviously a bit late for this card to generate real value because, of course, this Strengthen effect generates most of its value by, you know, allowing this card to come back multiple times. And you'll note that there is actually a real consideration to renew the Villain Treadmirth. A very, very real consideration. Because Villain Treadmirth is very scary in this matchup. Because, of course, all his Reaver Hunters come out at same amount of high strength. Just enables me to smash them very effectively. He's got another Artuza Adept. It's a dead one. Or does he only run 2? He might actually only run 2. It's pretty likely at this point, honestly. We'll open with Frost. That's really, really anticlimactic and shitty. Well... that's okay. I probably would have won that game, but it actually was kind of hard to say. What I would have done is I would have preferably waited for him to Hensel before Avalacking, although either way is kind of fine because he's drawing out the cards that are giving him basically no value outside of the card advantage. Go deep for that round, Avalac into 1 Shield Maiden, hopefully either 1 Axemen via a Freya or just drawing an Axemen and one Stamelford's. And you kind of know how it plays out at this point. Like, this deck just achieves ridiculous value going into those long rounds. Anyway, let's go to game 3.
Got the heart.
Okay. Oh, dot. So we get into our 3rd game here. Okay, 42. Playing the Cratch deck. I would call it a mirror, but the odds are he's not playing something that's actually too close to our deck. He's probably playing the normal Cratch variant without, you know, Axemen's or whatever. See what we got. So we've got Roach, Donor, Morkvarg, all good. We want to get rid of the Roach and the Morkvarg, obviously. Go for blacklisting off the Freya. The problem is finding a Shield Maiden. Finding 1 Shield Maiden isn't terrible. Kick a Freya, and then kick the Roach, and then kick the Morkvarg. Didn't find a Shield Maiden. Neat. You'll note that we have no golds outside of Renew. Bad hand. Could end up losing, although this deck has been very, very favored in this matchup.
Hide your stench.
And we did win the coin flip, which is just generally good news for us. Okay. Let's go ahead and pull this out.
For Spellige's glory! Smoke.
Don't necessarily need to stay ahead of him, but we'd very much like to here. Put pressure on. It's a pretty easy Biting Frost to apply here. Start with Frost. You start with Frost pretty early. The way this deck counters Frost is playing Hunter. I expect right now for him to play a Hunter between these two units. Wow, interesting. No Hunter.
Now! All together! Twister!
That's really interesting. Very, very unfortunate that we don't have a Stamelfords. I don't necessarily expect him to pass here after knowing what this deck is, but if he did pass here, we would normally Stamelfords to take it. Whoa. Clearing, yeah. The thing about Spellige is they can actually be in a pretty awkward position in terms of the weather clearing situation. Decoy the Morkvarg. In terms of the weather clearing situation, they can find themselves in a pretty awkward situation a lot of the time because they don't have a single weather clear, a single row clear for weather like every other faction does. Most factions have a unit that's tied to that row weather clear, which is Archgriffin, Blue Stripe, Scout, Freehead Brigade, and Nausicaa Standard Bearer. Spellige has the Armor Smith, but that is not really the same, ultimately. And that makes them kind of, like, generally you frost a single row and they don't really end up clearing it, because they usually can't afford to. Whoa. That's even ballsier. He just used one of his potential clears against a deck that he knows is probably pretty weather focused. Huh. It's pretty interesting. So we're really lacking the tools to be able to push out this round here, which kind of sucks. We'll decoy this Morkvarg, healing it back up. So basically what we're going to do next is we're going to Hunter between them. There was a consideration for doing that last turn, but the risk of that is that he places Hunter sniping off our Morkvarg before we can, and we don't really want that. We do of course have the unlock on the donor for the Morkvarg if we end up wanting to go down that line, now that we don't have the decoy to unlock him anymore. Decoy kind of has that dual purpose, which is nice. Not really concerned with that. It's getting him 1 point every single turn. Not a huge amount. The only problem here is
More hawk devour ye!
the only problem here is that we don't really have Stamelfords or more Frosts. We don't really have a way to push this round out. We got a little screwed by this hand. A little bit. Not necessarily, but hand definitely wasn't great. We would really much rather have some way to be able to push out round one. He can force us out of round one here, which is really rare for this deck, that he's able to actually force us out of round one.
Gods, not a moment's peace.
Bearing the Morkvarg. Aggressive play for round one. Considering where to put the bear. So he's blocking the fog in the ranged row, but he's opening up the fog in the melee row, which is pretty cool for me. Question is, would he have another clear? And the answer is it's not insanely likely. But this here, it's more likely to take damage than this one. Ends up giving it to us. We're gonna have to go 2 cards down for this, I think.
Not you again.
Yeah, we really, really, really wish we had either a Tremors or even a second Frost here. Second Frost would have helped a lot more earlier. Tremors would have helped a lot more now. It kind of sucks not being able to have those things. Olgierd is actually a lot bigger than Markvarg right now. So, that sucks. We'll see how this plays out. We don't have a renew target either. Ultimately, our hand was almost as bad as hands can really get in this deck. But hopefully, you know, we'll be able to, if not win, at least do very well to at least show that the deck can do very well even with a bad hand. Hopefully. Just locked out of our Tremors and Frost for the entire game. Super shitty. Get rid of Renew. This is a really bizarre situation where I feel like getting rid of Renew is proper. Finding Shield Maidens doesn't help me whatsoever. Wish I had Avalek. Sad. Renew in round 3 does nothing for me. I have a res on a 9 strength hunter, which is kind of cute. But not insanely cute. His Olgierd is locked forever. I don't know, I mean I could do a lot of damage this round. It's much better to just pass here. We need a better hand. We need a longer round and a better hand. We would absolutely love drawing Avalok here. I'm honestly not a huge proponent of this card in general. I feel like it's a card with a very symmetrical effect, and generally, in terms of symmetrical effects, it has one that's kind of tricky to make asymmetrical, right? For example, Operator, which we also run, it's not in the graveyard because it's doomed, but Operator has a very symmetrical effect, but it's actually quite easy to make asymmetrical. All you have to do is clone a bronze card that the opponent can't use as easily as you can, which is a lot of bronze cards in the game, and you've got an asymmetrical effect. The problem with Avalak is that it requires a very precise deck to be worth that gold slot in terms of the asymmetricality, I would personally say. I might be a little wrong about it though. It's just something I personally find awkward. And of course, again, rare situation Renew is bad. Like, super awkward here. The most awkward thing about this Renew is I have to kick it, which means I might draw a Shield Maiden, which could easily just completely fuck me. Okay, didn't draw Shield Maiden. But I also didn't draw any of my Tremors or Frosts. This is probably the single worst hand I've had playing this deck, and I've been playing this deck all day. I played this deck all day today on stream. Pretty shitty. That's fine though. Can't all be good ones. Would say it's still entirely winnable. So, we're resing 1 Axemen. Bring out a lot of Axemen. Okay. Just play our cards out. Nothing too fancy. Probably spread our Axemen out on the rows. The plan here is basically to play 3 Axemen. 2 from hand, 1 from Freya. There's no way to make this better. Like to heal it up or anything to prevent it from dying. That's okay. It's kind of making me think he might actually Ragnarok me. The fact that he put it there particularly. I'm a little scared of a Ragnarok. But at the same time, I don't want to play into Igni. I'll play the second Axemen on this row. Specifically because I don't want to play into Igni on the melee row. I don't want to damage any of his units yet. And even if he plays a Ragnarok, we're already committed to the range draw by units such as Lord of Undvik and Shield Maiden.
promise you a quick death.
Yeah, there's no way for me to heal at that. Normally you could use something cute like Decoy on it. Possibly even Wild Boar to heal it up in certain niche scenarios. Not really scared of Ragnarok anymore. He really would have used it already if he had it. I think. Might be wrong. I end up using Ragnarok quite late sometimes. We're always gonna res this 10 strength hunter. Resing one of our 4s. We could just Hjalmar early here. We'll just Hjalmar a bit early, playing very proactively. Roach comes out here. It's good Roach. And Roach is another card I get again screwed by off the redraws. It's possible Renew doesn't belong in this list. This don't get me wrong, this game misrepresented a lot of things, and one of those is Renew as a card, because I had to kick Renew literally twice and it almost fucked me out of this game, but it's very good. Not necessarily like core for this list, but it's solid. So, res a hunter. I could actually res 2 hunters. The problem with hunter is it doesn't give me a line to kill all the shield maidens because nothing damaged because I haven't drawn frost or tremors. I could be inclined to res a second hunter here. I think I probably am. So, I'll res the first hunter as the 10 and I'll set it up as Igni bait, I guess. Smash the Undvik here. It needs to be damaged so it can die to the shield maidens. And then I need to damage something else entirely. So if he has Igni, he'll use it on the hunter, which I just res. That's interesting. So we can't get the full value out of our shield maidens regardless. Yeah, we should lose this game.
Modern Freyr is patient, but she brooks no insult.
What is it?
He knows my last card is Shield Maiden. But I really can't get value out of them. And he didn't damage any of his units until late because he had card advantage. So I'm only getting a second Shield Maiden here, which kind of sucks. It doesn't really matter what I hit after this. So let's see him beat this value. His light long ship is of course doing very little against these Axemen, so let's see what he has. He committed his own Shield Maiden way early here. Looks like I take it.
I suppose. And the end.
So he positioned it to block off the long ship, but it doesn't end up being enough here. Great. So an incredible demonstration of, even while having, like I said, not an exaggeration, literally the worst draws I've had in this deck all day after playing. Yeah, I've played this deck for like 7 hours now at this point, maybe 8. We were still able to win without a single Stammelford's Tremors, and even with only one Frost that got cleared right away. Granted, obviously that's not going to... It's not saying this deck is so strong that it's impossible to lose or anything like that, but it's very powerful, ultimately. And we won 2 out of our 3 games, losing the second one to a disconnect, which, again, we might not have necessarily won. It looked like we were going to, but it's hard to say. Anyway, this is list. I think it's very powerful. It is what I would personally consider... A lot of people would be interested in knowing what tier this deck is, it's kind of a complicated question. It's extremely powerful right now. Like you saw, I was able to handily win games in the top 50 with this deck. It's very powerful right now, but that doesn't change the fact that it is very susceptible to certain counters, like for example, Marjo. This deck becomes popular. If it does become popular, people start running Marjo, this deck kind of starts dying. Because Marjo literally insta-gib Axemen no matter what their health is. Unless you, like, unless it's round 3 and they've got the veteran tag off twice, but even then it's not really that much better, because they still set them to 1 strength. So, it's a deck that kind of can't be tier 1 by definition, but that being said, that just means it can't be popular, really. Not that it can't be extremely powerful. That's an important distinction to note. Like right now, I was able to win games in, like, according to the current, like, win rate of this deck, what I was facing on ladder, I was able to win games in the same way that a tier 1 deck would, absolutely. But when it starts to rise in popularity, it'll get a little bit worse, might bump it down to tier 2, but of course, it's important to understand that even in that case, tier 2 is still a very competitive thing. Like, maybe after people are used to it, it might have a hard time breaking top 100, possibly. Not even sure about that. But even in that case, let's call that tier 2. It's still a very powerful deck. And I'd recommend it for anyone looking to get the most out of Axemen. I know a lot of people have been trying to make Axemen work. And like I said, people generally make the mistake of going with Herald. But Axemen can be very powerful in a list like this. Anyway, again, be sure to check out the Gwent DB guide in the comments. If you want a written guide or for updates, because obviously I can't update this video like I can a guide, and I'll see you guys next time.